Today, through worship, we are transported back to first century Jerusalem. With Jesus arriving in the area around Jerusalem, Jesus' long journey is coming to an end. For some, it seems like it's been a long time, and some, it seems like it's too quick, depending on how you experience time. The journey started way back in Luke chapter 9, where Jesus was telling his disciples what the journey would be like. He says the foxes have no holes, and his disciples would not have a place to lay their head. There would not be a home, there would not be a resting place. And so the journey spreads out before them. Jesus sends out the 72 to minister. He teaches about the Good Samaritan. He teaches on prayer. He warns about the Pharisees. He heals. He teaches about the lost sheep, the lost coin, and my favorite, the lost sons. Yet, if we think that Jesus' journey only started back in chapter 9, let's think again. Let's think that this journey that Jesus is on and we're on really started when God created the world. God continued to reach out to the people, to God's people, always wanting to draw them closer to God, always wanting them to step into the peace and the grace that God was offering. So it started with Abraham and Sarah reaching out. It started with Noah, Moses, and Miriam as those who God sent to reach out and gather God's people. The journey started with Joseph and his brothers, whom we talked about last week, as messengers of what God was doing for God's people. God has gone throughout history trying to save the people of the earth. And so today, we arrive at this particular moment where Jesus is entering into Jerusalem. And he sends his disciples, two of his disciples, in to get a colt, a donkey. Now, the donkey is significant in this story, in this part of the gospel. It's not like the donkey that Mary rides on. Remember, the donkey that we think of during that season of Advent and Christmas is not biblically based. The donkey is more of our tradition. But here in this gospel, Luke chooses to describe in detail the donkey. So the donkey tells us something significant about Jesus. And this particular part of Luke echoes the Old Testament, Zechariah 9 through 10. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. It's a donkey that has never been ridden before. There's something significant about the donkey. The donkey is a sign of humility. Jesus is not riding in on a great war horse. It's a sign of humility. And also, it's a sign of Jesus' foreknowledge of what was about to happen. Because Jesus told his disciples to go in, get the donkey. He told them what to say. It gives us insight that Jesus knew what was about to happen. Jesus knew that things had been laid out for him. A sign of him being the Son of God. And so in Luke's gospel, we get what the disciples are to say. Because they're to go in, take a donkey that doesn't belong to them, and they're supposed to say, "The Lord needs it." How many of you, if somebody came up to you, wanted your car, and they said, "The Lord needs it," you'd hand over your keys? Okay, I guess you guys would. I might be a little skeptical. But he does. He goes in and he says, "The Lord needs it." Again, a significant part of this gospel, the Lord, signifying that this is a king. The king needs it. The donkey tells us a lot about Jesus. So the Lord needs it, and they take it, and they place Jesus on it, and Jesus goes on into Jerusalem. We know that throughout history, many kings and conquerors have entered into Jerusalem. Many have ridden in to either take over or to proclaim that they are now the ruling power. And Jesus' processional is very similar to the way in which these kings had entered into Jerusalem. There's the multitude who are there. Does that sound familiar to you? The multitude? Doesn't that echo back to the birth of Jesus? There was the multitude of the heavenly host. And now, as Jesus enters into Jerusalem, we have the multitude gathered. And there was the multitude who were there at the feeding of the 5,000. And there was a multitude there when they handed over Jesus to Pilate. We're seeing this train of events connected and leading up to the point. So there's the multitude as Jesus is entering in. There are those who are going before him, proclaiming. And in Luke, we don't get the hosannas. We get, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Again, the Lord, a significant word because it is claiming Jesus to be king. And then, "Blessed is he who comes bringing peace." The peace of heaven. Not the peace that is gained through oppression, not the peace that is of this world, not a conflicted peace, but the peace of heaven. The peace that many of us imagine is the peace that we will have when we make the transition from this life to the next. But here Jesus is bringing that peace of heaven to us now and here on earth. So I imagine that as this processional is happening, the Pharisees begin to get a little nervous. You know, they've been watching this wandering preacher for a while. He's kind of got this following. He's kind of making waves. Like I said earlier in Luke, he has warned his followers about the Pharisees. So they're watching this processional and beginning to see similarities between this processional and processionals of previous kings and rulers. Like I said, those going on ahead, the waving of the palm branches, the proclaiming of whoever is riding in behind the processional as king. And it's similar. Even to the point that most rulers, when they would come into Jerusalem to take over, they would do all of that, processional, people before them, riding on a horse, and then they would go to the temple and make a sacrifice to God. What does Jesus do after the processional? Goes to the temple. What does Jesus do when he's at the temple? He cleanses the temple. Doesn't make a sacrifice, but he cleanses the temple. Again, claiming that he is king, that he is God, cleansing the temple. This isn't what the temple is for. So I, in my mind, begin to see those Pharisees start to get a little nervous. Start to go, who is this guy and what is this all about? Because this processional is for a king. But yet it's different. Because a normal king or ruler coming in would have an army before them. Imagine in your mind what Jesus had those of his disciples and followers who were going ahead of him. A ragtag group of fishermen and women and people who live on the margins of life. Similar, but different. Again, back to the donkey. Most would be riding a magnificent war horse. Jesus is on a donkey. So the Pharisees are uncomfortable. They notice something is shifting. And so they tell Jesus, please shut those people up. And what does Jesus say? If you quiet them, even the rocks will cry out. Yes, we're back to rocks, people. You thought with the Lenten study being over, we were done with our rocks. Well, we're not. Our rocks are still here. The rocks that we have been dealing with all of Lent. We have unpacked them from our backpacks. We have examined them. We have wrestled with them. Are you tired of the rocks? We have been carrying them, searching for ways to dealing with them, trying to find a way in which we can release the rocks that are weighing us down. And we, through study and through, have talked a bit about the tools. Oh yes, the tools. You know, I think you guys are waiting for new tools, but today, I have the same tools. Because we've talked about the tools. Yes, I did remember my glasses this time. First service, I left my glasses downstairs, and everybody was aghast that I would begin to chisel without my glasses. It's such a caring community. You guys are awesome. So, for 4 weeks, we've been chiseling away, and then last week, we realized that Jesus, as a carpenter working in Jerusalem and working in Galilee, was a stonemason. And Jesus was able to take our rocks as we work on them and turn them into something beautiful. Transform them from rocks that are weighing us down, rocks that are keeping us from receiving new life. And God is able to transform them into something beautiful. And so in this time in which we have been focusing on our rocks, we begin to see the cross emerge. We begin to see that when we allow God to work on our rocks with us, God transforms them into something beautiful. Now, I'm thankful for the images that those in the small groups that I participated in began to work with, craft, chisel out of their own rocks. Because they would begin to say, I'm praying that God will help me chisel my rock into a tool. And everybody in the group said, what kind of tool? Feeling, well, maybe it's a tool of destruction. No, they said, not that kind of tool, a tool that will help me to build something beautiful. Like the person who took the abuse in their life and then used it as a tool to help others heal. Taking our rocks, transforming it into something beautiful. Or the person who said, you know what? Rocks are for building also. I'm praying that I can take my rocks and build something beautiful. Our rocks can be transformed into something beautiful. I'm mindful that Jesus, in the coming week, will sustain injuries from rocks being thrown at him. I wonder if the rocks that Jesus sustained began on Palm Sunday, where were the hosannas and the praises that were lifted up in his name as he entered in Jerusalem. Did they feel like rocks being hurled at him because he knew what was coming? Were the palm branches and the cloaks that were laid before him as a red carpet, a sign of his royalty, did it feel like a mocking because he knew what road he was really on? But I'm aware, too, that in this Holy Week and the rocks that Jesus will sustain, which I hope we will walk with Jesus in that time, Jesus went on. Jesus went on for us, went on to the cross for us, for the lost sheep, for the lost coin, for the lost sons. Jesus went on for us so that the rocks that we carry, the hurts, the pains that we sustain, are not rocks that will bury us, but rocks that can be transformed. God went on throughout history, reaching out to the world. And today we celebrate here in this sanctuary the way in which Jesus went on to help us transform our rocks. Jesus goes on for us.